The first truth of perennial wisdom. All life is a manifesting of a dynamic, non-dual aliveness called by many names. The Tao, the Mother, Brahma, God, Allah, Yahweh, nature. And in the CSL tradition, we define oneness as the one infinite reality that is undivided, complete, and whole within itself. This oneness creates everything out of itself, and therefore includes both the absolute and the relative, the tangible and the intangible, the physical and metaphysical aspects of reality. And so in this knowing of oneness, which is what we're going to be talking about all month long, in this first principle and truth of perennial wisdom that follows us through all the faith traditions and philosophies and indigenous understandings throughout human history, is that there is a non-dual isness called by many names that you and I belong to, are made of, are a piece of, are uniquely shaped as. And that when you and I ground ourselves, root ourselves in this truth, abiding in this truth, all that we want to solve in our lives, in the world, becomes possible. From the root of truth. One of the words we use a lot in the science of mind teaching is realization. Making real, right? That's all that means. Making real. And when we busy ourselves in a very slow, intentional way with making this truth real, with actually making it the ground that you stand on, move from, live on, every sense of suffering, whatever your particular one is, or ones, becomes liberated, becomes untrue, becomes the place that you no longer ground yourself and root yourself on. And it may be the sufferings that have come from long lines of historical and familial trauma and harm. That it almost feels at times that there's no way to unroot ourselves from that false ground. And yet there's this greater truth, this more nourishing reality, that when we ground ourselves and move ourselves and transplant ourselves into that truth, that historical lineage, that historical trauma, that historical pain just becomes what it is. Some trauma and some harm that we get to become more whole as a result of. It no longer becomes the whole story. It no longer defines exactly who you are. It becomes part of your story. Not the ground you stand on, not the soil you plant yourself in. And that's true of any form of suffering, self-created or thrust upon you. Most people walk into rooms like this, find videos like this, looking for relief from some form of pain, discomfort, wishing something was different than it is. And what I gently like to invite people into is relief is not what we offer. Comfort is not promised in this work, but liberation and freedom is. You know, the promise of spiritual living, the promise of perennial wisdom is not to alleviate all pain. It is so that you and I can make real this infinite oneness that we belong to, are connected to in and as our individual and collective selves. And when we busy ourselves with making that real, we change everything. It changes how we show up in our relationships. It changes the proximity we put ourselves to. The people, places, things, situations, ideas that serve or don't serve. We get really clear from this place of truth, from this real sense of wholeness. Because the good news is the wholeness has never been missing. Your wholeness is never missing, has never been broken, cannot be broken, because you are divinely made. You are made of this infinite reality. Infinite reality means that this isness, this consciousness, this divine, this mother, father, God, whatever you want to name it, has made all that is out of itself. Which means what about you? You are made of divine stuff. This is the ground you stand on. This is the soil I want you to root yourself in. Allow yourself to be nourished by. Because from that ground you bloom and blossom into the divine creature you were intended to be on purpose here in the manifest reality. Every solution you ever have longed for lives in that soil and is waiting to be birthed through your aliveness. But as Mr. O'Donohue said, the call which is loosening your roots in false ground, that you might come free from all that you have outgrown. Which means you've got to be willing to get free of what no longer serves. I know you wanted me to say like, Happy New Year, rainbows and unicorns. Whee! Exactly. And really what I'm saying is, shh. Simmer down. And listen. Listen to what your inner self is wanting you to know. Feel what must be felt. That is present right here in your life. I am not asking you to like go dig stuff up. You don't need to go read a history book. You don't need to get hypnosis. Everything that you need in your particular unrooting is right here, right now. But you must be willing to be there with it. Conscious and aware of what might be really uncomfortable in that quiet stillness. You must be willing to hear and feel like that is not working for me anymore. Your wisdom and your body has all the information you need about what you have outgrown. And you know you have. I imagine, and people online, I want you to put this in the chat. I imagine every single one of us has a really clear idea of at least one thing, if not more than one thing, that needs to go. Yeah? I see little scared nodding. My beloveds online, at least one thing that has to go. Not because it or they are bad, because it no longer fits you, it no longer serves you. You are growing beyond that. And I think one of the huge reasons we don't like to simmer down and get quiet and still enough to feel and hear is because we don't want to confront those things. And yet winter's like, beloved, I got you. I'm going to slow everything down for you so you can take the time. And trust that because everything that you are, that life is, that has ever happened to you, that will ever happen to you, is part of this one infinite reality, which means that nothing has gone wrong. And it's in the outgrowing, it's in the releasing and the letting go and saying goodbye and no more of that, that you get to move more fully into your wholeness. This concept of all is well, which got really famous by the St. Julian of Norwich. All is well. All is well. Every kind of thing will be well, she said. And this is someone who was at death's door, having this understanding. But what that means is that even the stuff that needs to get gone, even the stuff that needs to be burned away, even the stuff that you need to create boundaries around and distance yourself from, even the goodbyes that you need to say, even the habits that you need to let go of, even all of that stuff is for your good, is for your greater becoming, which is always unfolding. And that is part of the all. And we spend a lot of our time wanting to be like, la, 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 la. I'm not watching that. I'm not listening. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to feel that. When instead, it's like, hey, look what happens when you allow yourself to be present with this thing that's really uncomfortable. Really uncomfortable. And you allow yourself to sit with that and get the wisdom and the marching orders that often come with that discomfort. And you are gifted by it, actually. We've made discomfort something to medicate in this culture. We've made pain the enemy. And we think that spiritual practice and all the things, right? The drugs and the gambling and the sex and the binging all the channels of all the things. We think these are the ways that we will just feel better. Or just not feel at all. And yet life is perfectly designed with feelings, with discomfort, with pain. Suffering gets in the mix when you and I work overtime to make something that is not. When you and I work overtime in avoidance, in numbing, in distracting. When you and I do everything in our power to make it go away. When instead, if we just allow ourselves to be present with that discomfort, with that pain, we get the gifts of it. I remember about 10 years ago now, I was sick, and pretty sick. And I remember thinking to myself after I got done shaking my fist at life and yelling at God and, everybody who had anything to do with anything, when I got through the anger phase, I realized I am not getting out of this situation without a gift. I literally would wake up every morning and see a big white box tied with a red ribbon. I'm getting my gift. If I have to go through this, I'm getting the gift. But we can approach all of it that way, trusting This idea that it is one infinite reality. And this one infinite reality, this God, this goddess, this mother, this father, this Brahma, this Allah, this Yahweh, is always for good. And for sure, there's a gift in it. We actually get to have agency and choice about how we walk this life. And we have absolute possibility to get free in this lifetime. Like today. It's a choice. And it's a practice. O'Donohue said, and for the interim time, what is being transfigured here is your mind. And it is difficult and slow to become new. The more faithfully you can endure here, the more refined your heart will come for your arrival in the new dawn. It is slow to become new, and it requires faith to endure the discomfort, the uncertainty, the unknown. And again, when we step back to the ground of oneness, the ground of this non-dual aliveness, we can trust that the unknown and the uncertainty and the ever-changing form of life itself is trustworthy, is faith-worthy. And when we pull our roots out of false narratives, inherited BS, cultural norms that are crap, when we pull our roots out of those things and intentionally root ourselves on the ground of the isness, of the good, when it gets uncomfortable, when it feels uncertain and even unsafe, you can allow yourself to be held in that uncertainty and on that safety by the ground of the truth itself. To this infinite reality that you are a divine member of. The one place of belonging that actually matters. A lot of people feel like life has changed, and if I could just get with the life has changed piece, all will be well. But what I want you to know, yes, life has changed, and it's going to keep doing that, because that's life. But there is a changeless ground. There is a changeless reality that I call the Holy Blessed One that is ever available, never missing, holding you whenever you feel like laying down and taking a rest. Without fail every time. That ground, that reality is something I believe is the most important thing you and I could be spending our time making real. I actually can't think of another thing more important. And my plan is to make that real all year, not just tonight. And I invite you to begin with intention. Begin to make this the most important thing, because whatever life is going to do, whatever change is going to do, whatever the crazy of social structures and systems that are crumbling before our eyes is going to do, you have a changeless ground to rest on. You have a freedom to embody and experience and offer in this wild thing called life. And one of the ways then I'm going to invite you to begin is to center. Centering practices, again, go back through all time, all peoples, and look a whole bunch of ways. But the purpose of centering is to bring your attention and your awareness to the center of your being. To draw yourself back from all the places you may have rooted in, and bring all of you back through your attention, through your consciousness, into the center of your own being, the core of who you are. And one of the things about centering that I love that's a little bit different than just your basic meditation techniques that help you quiet the mind. This is not that. This is about growing your awareness of your wholeness. This is about getting into real relationship with your true nature. All of it. The nature that has been divinely made and is that it already in belonging with the infinite reality, with the divine, with all that is. And I have lots to say about meditation. It's just not going to be this month. Because I really, really want you to begin with your wholeness. Because I know every single one of us, and I know that's true for you, beloveds online as well, have a deep longing and desire to be good in the world, to do good in the world, to see good in the world. And I want you to just hang on for a minute and stop doing that. I want you to get rooted in the ground of your own being, in the ground of your own divinity, in the ground of your own nature, which is uniquely shaped like you. And from that ground, you bloom. From that ground, you are divinely moved in right action. But that unrooted action, it's not cute. All the mess, guess how that came into being? Anybody want to shout it out? All the mess comes into being when we are rooted in false ground. When we have forgotten ourselves. When we have let the noise be louder than the truth. So you and I must begin and make centering, centering the wisdom of the divine that is in your being. Because really, nothing that I say, nothing that you can go read or get from somebody or something else outside of you is going to be real for you until you ground and root in that wisdom and that knowing and that truth that is yours. In your language, in your flavor, in your smell, in your feeling, in your shape. And the centering practice, which again, I actually want to hear from some of you about ways you may do that already or ways that you may think about doing it. The centering practice is simply, again, any activity or practice that brings your full attention, your awareness, your consciousness, and centers it on your core, the core of who you are, in your totality, in your physical, mental, spiritual wholeness. I see some squinty faces, so let's talk about it. What might centering practices look like in your life? And if you're feeling brave, I'd love for you to come get on the microphone so the beloveds online can see and hear you. Praying, tell me more about that. Like, break it down. What does praying look like for you? Deep breathing. Say that again. Listening to yourself. So, and again, I want to unpack that so that somebody in this room or somebody on the other side of that camera might be able to make use of this. So when you sit down to pray, to listen to yourself, what exactly do you do?
Take a couple of deep breaths and then say, God, help me out here.
God, help me out here. I love that. So you breathe, you're quiet, and I feel like you wait. And do you always get a response? Okay. It's not always the response you would like. So that is a centering practice. Simple. What else? What else might centering look like in your practice? Gratitude. Say more. How do you do it? So I want to point out, so here's one of the things that I think is really important as we begin to pull our roots out of false ground and plant ourselves in truth. When I'm struggling, he says, I go to my gratitude practice. Just that piece is a big deal. Because when I'm struggling, there could be a whole bunch of other choices to make. Yes? Anybody? Chocolate? Netflix binges? Distracting and numbing myself in infinite amounts of ways? So one small kindness you could do for yourself is make a new choice when you're struggling. So when you're struggling, you go to gratitude. What do you do? Oh, I sit down, I write anything to be grateful for, and I start with thank you. And it brings me back to a state of appreciation. That's pretty good. Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody do a more embodied kind of practice? Yoga. What does that look like for you? So you go into yoga with a purpose of quieting yourself with an intention. The physical movement helps you get out of your head. That's major, y'all. I know that I am not alone in this, but I can't go into sitting meditation if I haven't moved first. It's just not going to happen. I can't be like, okay, I'm going to be quiet now. No, it's like sitting in the room with a killer, what's happening in here. But if I move first with intention and purpose, I can go sit forever after that. It's like I spend it through my body. I quiet my whole self first. Because we live in a culture, we've inherited a way of being that prioritizes thinking. And so all of us overthink. There's no one who escapes that. I don't care what story you want to tell me, everybody overthinks. So we have to unlearn that. We have to pull the roots out of that ground. And having an embodied practice as part of your centering is a brilliant way to begin to unroot from a really busy mind. Because it is actually not our only wisdom. It is not our only intelligence. And we've gotten really disconnected from all these other intelligences happening in our beings. But this is what centering is about, is getting into relationship with all our centers of intelligences. All of them, not just this one. It's really good for some things, not great for a bunch of other things. And it is part of your divine nature. You and I have been designed as incredibly brilliant, intelligent beings on purpose. And that wholeness includes all of it. But it requires not just intention, but real decision around, I am choosing to know my wholeness. And that very choice, the choice and then the practice of knowing your wholeness is the way of freedom. It is that wholeness that's got you, that's got us. But most of us walk around in this life like head up. And most of the mess we've created in the world comes from this way of being. So imagine what begins to happen when we root ourselves away from this way of being and root ourselves into wholeness. What kinds of solutions get created out of that brilliance? What kind of interdependence begins to rise, and mutual aid and generosity begins to rise as we begin to more deeply make real our true natures? So I would love for you to begin with centering. And I'm going to hop online and make sure I didn't miss anybody here. Wayne says his practice is practicing the golden bubble of peace. And Wayne, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but in my head, it means a meditation of surrounding yourself, placing yourself in a golden bubble of peace. All right, let me check our other channel. And Geraldine Crippen says that she practices happiness as just simply choosing happiness. So before you, for the love of all things holy, please, before you make any kind of New Year lists, before you set any goals, before you do any of those things, I want you to find a centering practice. And there's a centering practice, a simple practice that we've made available on the blog with simple steps to follow. And you could begin there. But remember, its whole purpose is for you to bring your full awareness and attention to yourself. And the other tip I will give you, because I know some of you, I'm going to hear about it next week, and I want to hear about it next week. Some of you are going to go into this practice and you're like, I can't, my head and its thoughts, and I'm grocery shopping and I can't think about all the. Yes, all of that's going to happen because that's part of your wholeness, this overactive mind. And you're just going to keep coming back to you, even if you have to do it every breath. Deal? All right, are we ready to anchor this in prayer? So what I want us each to do in this moment is to come back to the truth that you, I, we are holy. You and I, and we are holy because there is only one infinite, holy, blessed one that has created all that is out of itself and brought you and I here, uniquely shaped, made of this infinite good on purpose in this moment in time, with breath in our bodies, to be the ground of good, to be the way of freedom, to know our divine natures as the only truth that is uniquely and particularly shaped like you. And because you and I make it our priority, make it central to what it is that we do on a daily basis, you and I begin to be the creators of the world that we want to be living in. You and I, from this ground of good, rooted in the truth of who we are, begin to create the relationships and the health and the well-being beyond our dreams. You and I become the solutions that the world is looking for. You and I become the love that is looking for greater expression on this planet. Always moving for good, you and I, because the infinite, holy, blessed one is always moving for good, and that is what you and I are doing here. And so I just relax in such deep gratitude, trusting the blossoming, the growing, the becoming that is already underway. Delighting in all of the ways that you and I show up in the world and ourselves for ourselves, knowing they are harmonious and beautiful and peaceful and joyous and wonderful. Amen. And so it is.